To understand Napoleon is a complex matter. He was cherished and despised by many in equal measure, and the once master of Europe shared his life with multiple romantic partners, ranging from his magnum opus coronation to his coup de grace death in exile. But perhaps understanding his tumultuous relationship with his first wife Josephine is even more arduous. Josephine was born into the well-off Tachia de la Pagerie family of colonial plantation owners in the Caribbean island of Martinique. She was not addressed to as Josephine in her early life, but as Rosée. The moniker of Josephine came to use after meeting Napoleon. The Taché family finances suffered a blow when natural disasters laid waste to much of their sugar plantation estates. As was common practice for impoverished noble families at the time, Josephine was married to Alexander de Beauharnais, son of the governor of Martinique, François de Beauharnais. Arriving at France at the age of 16 to marry Alexander, she was unwelcome in the upper echelons of French high society, owing to her unsophisticated colonial heritage. Her marriage to Alexander produced 2 children, but was an unhappy one, as her first husband was noted for his philandering and extramarital affairs. Josephine and Alexander separated in 1785, leaving Josephine in an economically destitute situation. She returned to her family home in Martinique in 1788, leaving after 2 years to escape a slave revolt on the island. Alexander, meanwhile, had been a political crime lord in the chaotic revolutionary setting after the deposition of the monarchy in 1789, even attaining the rank of the President of the Constituent Assembly in 1791. The Terror, however, was a time of great uncertainty, leading to Alexander being guillotined in 1794 for having failed to defend mines against the advancing Prussian-Austrian armies and political conspiracy. Josephine was sentenced to share her husband's fate, only to escape execution with Robespierre's downfall a week later. Josephine decided to stay in France after her first husband's death and continued her social climbing with important figures of the era. One such figure was a young up-and-coming general by the name of Napoleon. They would soon be married in 1796, after Napoleon was appointed commander of the army of Italy. He was infatuated with Josephine, but the feelings were not mutual. She was 6 years his senior, mother to 2 children from her previous marriage, and a widower. The marriage drew the ire of Napoleon's family, especially his mother Letizia, who saw Josephine as an unsuitable match, both for her social circumstances and for her extravagant spending of Napoleon's finances. The constant military expeditions of Napoleon meant that the couple were estranged from each other for long periods of time. The nature of their marriage changed after both started having affairs from the resulting physical distance from each other. Josephine secured her position despite these developments by having religious marriage ceremony in the 1804 coronation. Josephine, in her role as empress, demonstrated a tact for fashion and court events, meant to demonstrate the prestige of her office. The constant infidelities of the couple produced a rocky marriage, garnering threats of divorce from Napoleon. These threats were amplified by Josephine's inability to produce an heir to the emperor. Following numerous unsuccessful attempts to treat Josephine's infertility, Napoleon and Josephine finally divorced in 1809 on a legal technicality. Despite their separation, Napoleon sought to preserve her title as empress and allowed her to maintain the Malmaison estate. After Napoleon's exile to the island of Elba in 1814, she was put under the protection of the Russian Tsar Alexander, with whom she shared a love for the arts and culture. She would die from pneumonia a month after Napoleon's abdication in 1814. The relationship between Josephine and Napoleon was a peculiar one, rife with infidelities on both sides, but also embedded with genuine affection. Perhaps telling of this is Napoleon's final words before his death. Josephine.
Marie-Louise, who was the second wife of Napoleon Bonaparte and Empress of the French, shaped women's changing position in politics and society under Napoleon's regime, the unique position of her occupied in European politics throughout her life. A member of both Habsburg and Bonaparte families, Empress Mary-Louise represents a direct link between the old ruling structures of aristocratic Europe and the formation of Napoleon's new imperial dynasty. Imaged as a queen, diplomat, daughter, mother, and artist, Mary-Louise was at once subject to the same iconographic conventions for female aristocratic portraiture that had been used for centuries and a catalyst for artistic innovation and experimentation. Against the backdrop of volatile political climate and the rise of nationalism, Mary-Louise navigated multiple roles in 19th century Europe, serving as Archduchess of Austria, Empress of the French, and Duchess of Parma, Piacenza, and Guastella. After the treaties of Tilsit in 1807, powerful Austrian diplomat Metternich had been aware of rumors that Napoleon intended divorcing with Empress Josephine and taking a new wife who could provide him with a son. Metternich accordingly began to press diplomatically for a marriage between Napoleon and the Archduchess Mary-Louise, who is the eldest daughter of his master Emperor Francis I and a great niece of Marie Antoinette. Mother of the girl proposed as a bride, being strongly opposed to such a match, having heard stories about the French emperor's impotence. Impatient for marriage to what is described as a walking womb because he could not get satisfactory answer from the Russian court about his proposal, Napoleon had decided he would marry the Austrian girl instead. By all accounts, she was neither particularly good-looking nor graceful. Her walk was ungainly. She was tall and fair with a clear smooth skin and ample bosom. She had rather protuberant eyes and the ugly characteristic of her family, but she was said to be malleable and obedient, likely to become deeply attached to her husband as she was to her father. Undoubtedly, Napoleon treated his wife with utmost regard and consideration, but in the affection with which he inspired her was more admiration than tenderness. He was too great for her. She was fascinated but troubled by so great power and so great genius. On March 11, in 1810, Mary-Louise married Napoleon by proxy at the Augustinian Church in Vienna. Then, at St. Cloud, April 1, the civil marriage was celebrated. They had a son and spent 4 years together, then never saw each other again. After Napoleon's exile, Mary-Louise had left Paris with her son, then arrived at her father's court in Vienna. She has been blamed for not having joined Napoleon at Elba, for not having even tried temporary sufferings at St. Helena, for not consoling him in any way, for not even writing to him. Josephine has retained her popularity because she was tender, kind, and devoted even after she was divorced, while Mary-Louise has been criticized because after saying that she loved Napoleon, she deserted him when he was a prisoner. All in all, at the end, rather than being a model wife or a model widow, she decided to obey her father's rigid orders and become again what she had been before her marriage, simply an Austrian princess.
Maria Walewska. Maria Walewska got the attention of Napoleon at Brony, where a crowd gathered to welcome him. According to Christopher Hubert, she was outstanding from the crowd with her hat and beauty. Napoleon offered her the flower that the crowd threw at his carriage. He wanted to learn who she was and asked General Duroc to identify her. They learned that she was the wife of Polish nationalist Count Walewski. Napoleon wanted to arrange a meeting where he would meet her, but she declined. So, Napoleon claimed he would not attend to the meeting otherwise. Given the poor state of Poland at those years, several people attempted to persuade Count Walewski so that the Countess changes her mind, since the Poland's national interests were at stake. They needed France for their liberation from Prussia and Russia. When nationalists come to the house of the Count, he let them persuade Mary. According to Mr. Hubert, Count accepted that she needed to make a sacrifice for the country. After all these events, she accepted the offer of Napoleon. At the meeting, she made no actions that were interpreted as an attempt which would attract the interest of honored guest, Napoleon himself. After the meeting, Napoleon sent her several letters and presents, in order to attract Mary's attention. According to the Mr. Hubert, she said, "He treats me like a prostitute." Eventually, she offered herself to him. Yet, when Napoleon started to touch her, she suddenly resisted. Napoleon lost his temper and threatened her to destroy the Poland and throw a watch at her feet. She fainted, and Napoleon abused her,